Luke in Minnesota, thanks so much for waiting.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. I've been listening to you guys for several months now.
I've been doing it for several months.
You basically
Makes sense.
Yeah, I know. So I am an atheist, and I stopped being a theist about 3 years ago. And I basically wanted to ask, sort of, I've listened to the show for a long time, and I wanted to ask this question because I haven't heard it explained so far, which is, or at least to my satisfaction, which is, why is skepticism, the way you guys presented on your show, sort of the best path to truth? I've heard you talk about, if you have two completing truth claims, how do you know what methodology to use to find one is better than the other? And my question is, why should that apply equally to God? I've heard it referred to as maybe special pleading, that God shouldn't have a separate category of thought about him, and we should apply the same methodology to him or her or it. And so, yeah, the reason I am concerned about this question is because when I stopped being a theist, it was not for directly rational reasons. It was because, I came out as gay to my family. I had an interpersonal crisis, and I basically adopted atheism out of choice and necessity. And, part of my insecurity is I don't want to use post hoc rationalizations to set up my God belief or not accepting of a God belief. So that's my question to you.
Well, so first of all, do you understand that the burden of proof is on the people who are claiming that there is a God and they haven't met it?
Yes. I guess my question, I do understand the burden of proof is for anything you make a positive claim, right? So if you don't accept it, that's not the same as you don't have to prove something.
No. Don't believe so. The default position is to begin, for any claim that X exists, the existence needs to be demonstrated, because if you just believe it, then what you end up with is conflicting beliefs. And so you would put yourself in a position where you would have to believe that multiple different gods exist, or multiple different things exist that you don't have any evidence for. This is why we wait for evidence. But when you asked about skepticism is an ideology. It's not a tool set. Skepticism is an ideology that says we're going to use the demonstrably best tools available to understand reality. So when you say, why is skepticism the best path? Because it is. Because you might as well just say, we're going to use the best path, and we're going to call that skepticism. And all it means is, anytime we're evaluating something, we are going to use the methodology that has demonstrated it is most reliable, and so that you can believe as many true things and as few false things as possible, so that you don't get duped and conned.
Yes. Okay. I mean, that makes sense to me. And, I have no objection to it. I think part of my question is also, what is the harm, I guess, or if let's say I come from the assumption that I can't demonstrate a God. I don't believe there's a way to demonstrate a God. I've come to that conclusion already. But let's say I just want to believe something I have no evidence for just because I want to. Is that harmful?
Yes.
It also, to me, if I may, Luke, because you said you came to your identity as an atheist from a traumatic experience or a traumatic journey, there certainly does, I think you might need to further reflect on seeking additional support for that. Because being an atheist doesn't mean that you're just that you're just saying everything skepticism or using all of these big scientific or these big words all the time. I think that's a huge misconception that many believers have. So you may want to you may want to consider and do more of a deep dive into your journey, and And the fact that you should just be able to explain that, you don't believe any gods exist because there is lack of evidence and that there is no demonstrable proof of any gods.
I want to give you
Mhm.
I wanted to make sure Mandisa got to talk because it's important, and I'm not going to get it all right, but to give you a more robust answer than just yes. First of all, I genuinely have difficulty understanding how anyone could say, is it really harmful for me to believe what I want, irrespective of whether or not I have good reason? That to me is one of the most harmful, asinine questions I've ever heard. I've heard it from many people, so
Mhm.
you're not alone. And I'm sure that all of us at some point have felt like that. But the truth is, I don't even think you can. Like, there's a difference between saying, I am convinced this is true, which is what that believes, and I'm going to act like I'm convinced this is true. And so, what your question is, hey, why can't I just believe what I want? Well, because you can't. Belief isn't a choice. You don't get to choose what you believe. You're either convinced or you're not. And what you're really doing is saying, I'm going to act as if I'm convinced so that maybe I might fool myself, or perhaps if there is a God, fool that God. But you're not really. You're not really convinced. If you think that belief, it's like, oh, I'm just going to believe that I've got $1 billion. I'm going to believe that I'm the most handsome person on the planet. Well, I am, but I'm going to believe that. See how that works? Nobody should do that. And the thing is, even if you found something like, I'm gonna choose to believe that this. Actually, let's not use that. I'm going to choose to believe that this pair of glasses is lucky. Now, that comes with consequences. So what a lot of people do is say, okay, well, let me choose to believe something that doesn't come with any consequences. Like, I'm going to choose to name. So I don't know what doesn't come with consequences, because even if you isolate it down to where I believe this set of glasses is magical, but only right now for the next second, and then after that, they're not magical anymore, which means that nothing about my belief is lasting. You still have the belief, which means that you now have a heuristic model in your head, a mechanism by which you evaluate things, that you can say, today, for this instant, I'm not going to rely on evidence. I'm just going to go with what my gut feels or what I prefer. And as long as that model exists in your head, that means that you can not only use it for glasses for 1 second, but you can use it for other things as well. So you either care about whether or not your beliefs are true, or you don't. And if you do, then you can't be asking about, well, why can't I just believe what I want? Because first of all, beliefs aren't a choice. And second of all, because you care about what's true and you know more, you understand this stuff better than that. You couldn't possibly say, well, this time I'm just going to believe it. No, you're lying to yourself, which we all do. And this is what we mean by the difference between believing something and believing in belief. There's huge benefits to acting as if you believe, of going to church, of hanging around with people, of, hey, when somebody says, oh, I think that, isn't it a beautiful world that God's made? And you're like, yes, it is, because now you're talking about positive stuff and you just get to talk about that. And what could possibly be the harm? I'll tell you what the harm is. The harm is you're propping up the exact same beliefs that want to punish you for the fact that you're gay. The Bible doesn't discriminate. People do. People get to cherry pick whatever they want out of whatever holy book they want. They can say, oh, this is in the Bible, so I'm going to believe it. Oh, but this is in the Bible and I'm not. Well, on what grounds do you decide to believe that God made the earth in 6 days out of magic, but that God didn't tell people that if a man lies with another man as he lies with a woman, they've committed an abomination or deserving of death? How do you cherry pick that once you accept that there is a God that could have said either?
Right. And I would say I take a slightly different take. I have a slightly different take on whether, beliefs are a choice or not. I mean, I do think that um if you continue to believe in something after you have come to an informed decision or an informed conclusion, it's not a good choice. Certainly it's not, but certainly you if you are of sound and of mind, then well, then again, you may not necessarily be, but um, I just really that is very irresponsible, and I would say in your case to I would say to absolutely reevaluate why you came to that conclusion and whether it was the rational one for yourself.
Where are we at, Luke?
Thank you so much for those thoughts.
Yeah.
I think you went into several different avenues that I was about to ask you about, and then you just addressed it before I even said anything. Especially the difference between acting like you believe something and actually believing it.
Yeah.
And then,
by the way, a lot of people seem to think that they could fool a God, which I find laughable. Like if there is a God, and you're like, oh, I'm not really convinced there's a God, but I'm gonna act like there is, and I'm like, who do you think you're fooling?
Well, I mean, there could, in the realm of possible gods that you could describe, one of them might reward a person who tries without proof.
Yeah, and one of them might reward people who aren't acting gullible, and one of them might reward people who aren't lying about what they believe, and one of them might, how do you tell which one's the right one? Why not just be intellectually honest? And then if there's a God that decides to punish you for being intellectually honest, he's a prick.
Yeah, and that's I think where you and I align. Mike, I guess, is there a way to combine any of those circumstances in such a way where you could try to come up with a belief in a God where you understand that you're not actually believing it, but you act like you believe it and it doesn't cause harm? For example, I choose to believe in the Loch Ness Monster because I think it makes the world a little more magical, even though I don't think it's there. Or I choose to act like it's there, even though I know I have no reason to believe it,
Okay. Are you asking that as a hypothetical? Or are you saying that you are someone who just believes there's a Loch Ness Monster, or acts like you believe in a Loch Ness Monster, even though you don't have good reason?
I mean, as a hypothetical, I don't actually believe in a God, and I don't necessarily have an interest in pretending like
let's just go with that hypothetical.
I'd like to be able to get along with my family, or the hypothetical.
Sure, I'd like to be able to get along with my family too. And you know what I did? I said this far and no further. And if you want to have a relationship with me, you knock that shit off. And it turns out that they love me just enough to not do the things that were causing the problem, because I wasn't doing anything to cause a problem. I was just living my life and not believing in their God. Now, that's not going to work in every situation, every family. But let's go with the Loch Ness Monster. Mandisa, I now believe in the Loch Ness Monster. What's wrong with that?
Well, why do you believe in the Loch Ness Monster? What is your proof of the Loch Ness Monster?
I just want the world to be more magical, so I thought I would believe in a magical being.
Again, what is can you absolutely demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that the Loch Ness Monster exists?
No, but why should that matter? I just want the world to be more magical.
Well, we don't live in a magical world.
You don't know that. How dare you take away my magic? The underlying reason for wanting to believe in the Loch Ness Monster is to want a world that, you even said it yourself, Luke, you want a world that's more magical. Well, tough shit. Yeah. The world is exactly as magical as it is or isn't. And if you are desiring a world that seems more magical, that means that you are intentionally setting aside the facts of this reality. Mm-hmm. And while I can understand why someone who may be facing a terminal diagnosis may not feel the same way about it I do. I want to know. I know people who don't want to know. I know people who would want to be lied to. But if you have a cancer diagnosis and all your life you've wanted the world to be more magical, so you kind of act like there's fairies and everything else, are your chances greater, or is there a greater chance or a weaker chance that you're going to buy into pseudoscientific magical remedies for your cancer out of desperation over scientific medicine?
Right. Which can also impact the people around you, your families, if you have children. It can also cause you to make very irrational decisions and put finances into something that really and not only has it not been proven to work, but it's ultimately a waste of time, which again affects not just you, but others around you. Because we don't just exist in this world by ourselves. We don't live in a bubble, no matter how much at times we want to. That's just not the reality.
It would, there's reasons why we shouldn't believe things.
Yeah. Sorry if I have a barking dog in the background.
No problem.
Yeah, I think that back and forth about the Loch Ness Monster helped me kind of understand, even if you tried to invent something that I think has no harm, or that just for the sake of you want to, there's always some kind of reason behind it that could lead to some slippery slope of harm at some point. So why bother?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
That part.
I think that we're short-sighted and we assume that things like things that live in our brain, we think they're not going to have an impact. And that's just because we're not really looking that hard at what potential impact there really is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for those thoughts. I think that basically answered my question.
Awesome. Thank you
Good.
so much, Luke. I appreciate it.